Just real quick before we jump into this week's episode, if you have not yet subscribed to Some Assembly Required on your favorite podcast player, please do so. It'll help me a lot. And if you're new here, I'm so glad you found us. My name's Sean. Right, let's go. Some Assembly Required is about matters of the heart and the head. And sometimes the heart and the head disagree. Other times they're scattered and they just can't align. At least that's what I've been told. Today's episode is about attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, also known as ADHD. My first encounter with ADD, as it was known then, was while teaching children to swim. This particular 5-year-old had been coming for lessons for quite some time already when he arrived and barely greeted me. He was disengaged, lethargic, and the scariest of all to me was that he was extremely quiet. This was not the same bundle of energy I had become so accustomed to seeing on a weekly basis. And that's when his dad said, "Sorry, it's late. Aftercare forgot the Ritalin." That was probably the early 2000s. Fast forward 23 years later, and I have friends and colleagues who speak about struggling to focus, and I myself joke about being hyperactive. But how does ADHD affect adults, the good and the bad? And what better way to hear about it than from someone that has been diagnosed? Terence Mentor, thank you for agreeing to share your journey.
Thank you for having me.
And we're going to say up front that this episode is in no way to be considered as advice or diagnose yourself for argument's sake, but it is an account of your experience with ADHD. I mean, you have every right to keep it to yourself. Why is it that you are happy to speak about it?
I think I'm so happy to speak about this because it made my life so hard for so long not understanding this. And I think there's real freedom in being able to work through that struggle and potentially talking about it and helping someone else maybe not have to struggle so much. It also helps me personally not feel so alone because, like I said, whenever I do speak about this openly, I'll go on social media and I'll just talk about my own experience, and I'll have 5, 6, 10, 20 comments from different people, some people who have been in my life for a long time saying, "Hey, I was also diagnosed. Hey, I also have this experience." So it really helps to feel less alone.
So then, if I may ask, what's it like inside your head? What's going on in your head at any moment of the day?
It's a mess. It's a mess of doubt. It's a mess of different ideas. And it's a lot of negative talk because I get so frustrated with myself so often. I think that's the best way to talk about it, because I will know, for instance, that I have a big campaign or project that I have to be working on, and I just can't get myself to do it. Or I'll be in the middle of doing that work and I'll get a great idea for a new podcast or a new episode or a new book I want to write or a new hobby that I want to take up. And all of a sudden, that's all I can think about. And I just want to get myself, I know what I should be doing. I know where I should be focusing, and I just can't get my brain to do it. It's an impossible hurdle. So there's a lot of that frustration. And then there are times when everything just aligns, where the thing that I'm working on is what I'm super focused on. I'm hyper focused on that. The ideas for that particular project is flowing. There's a problem that other people haven't been able to solve that I see the solution really clearly, or there's a pattern that's happening in my life that I go, oh, I see the pattern there, and I can affect change based on that pattern. And when that happens, that feels super good, and I get very excited, and I can't stop talking about that kind of stuff. But generally, it's a mess of all of those things. It's a lot of negative thought. It's a lot of self-doubt. It's a lot of like, this is brilliant. There's a lot of, this is the worst. And I hope even in the way I'm answering that question, it gives you a little bit of an idea of how messy it is in there.
It sure does. It also makes me feel a bit better about what's going on inside. I also don't feel so alone now. And on that note though, Terence, so what was it like for you then to learn that other people's brains don't necessarily operate the same way? What was it like to learn that your experience is different from other people? And how did that make you feel? They don't kind of navigate the world the same way that you do.
I actually remember this moment because it was very late on in life. I had been married for a few years already, and I had been really struggling with my mental health. One of the issues with ADHD is that it affects other parts of your mental health as well. So I was really struggling with depression and anxiety, and I was in the kitchen cleaning the dishes, and I was really having a difficult day. And I was talking to my wife about it because she really wanted to try to understand what was going on. And I was just like, and I said, I just can't keep, we all have that voice in our head that just tells you that you're shit all the time. And today I can't keep that voice down today. And it's just reminding me how awful a person I am. And she was like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, the voice that you have that tells you how terrible you are and everything. And she's like, I don't have that voice. Sometimes I have that, sometimes I know I'm not doing a good job and I need to do better, but I don't have an internal thing in my head saying that to me all the time. And that's when I was like, oh, wait, there's something different going on in my mind. And that started this journey of me realizing that there were some things that were divergent about my brain. And then when I started to investigate ADHD further and I got my diagnosis, to be told that there are people who can sit for an hour and just focus on a task, as an adult, to sit for an hour and just focus on a task and do that task. Or to have someone who is told, hey, this project is due in 3 months' time. It's best if you work on the project every single day a little bit for 3 months. And they do that. How? I don't understand how you do. How do you keep something in your head for 3 months and you do a little bit of it every single day? That is insane to me. How do you not need the panic of a due date tomorrow to force you to get the stuff done? That there were people who don't need external forces to get them to do a hard thing. That blew my mind. And it made me feel less than. It made me feel like there was a deficit. And I hate that word. I hate that, unfortunately, a lot of people, and me included, feel like the term ADHD is the incorrect term, but it did make me feel at that point that I had a deficit. It also explained why I struggle to do exercise. I can't go for a run every single day for 30 minutes and let my mind drift off, because my mind doesn't drift off. I'm so in the moment every single time that I feel every painful footstep that you take in a run. I can't do the same thing every single day because my mind rages against that. So it really did feel like, oh, whoa, I am less than. And that was my first engagement with it.
The process of being diagnosed, you speak already about it was relatively late in life. So my question is, when were you diagnosed and what's that process to getting a fixed diagnosis? So,
it was about 3 years ago now that, let me think. I should have prepped for this interview, but again, it was about 3 years ago. And it had always been something that like I said, I'd been aware that there was a deficit, there was a difference, I was struggling to succeed in the way the world currently works. I just thought it was because I had in all honesty, to be frank, I honestly thought I had a low IQ. I thought that I was not smart enough to get a degree. I was not smart enough to be promoted. I was not smart enough to do things that I would love to be able to do. I just thought, oh, okay, I'm below average. And every time I'd say that, my wife would get very angry with me, but I'm like, look, the results, if intelligence is measured on the outcomes, my outcomes are low. So therefore, but then weirdly, I got on TikTok. I started watching TikTok, and the TikTok algorithm is very good at telling you things about yourself that you didn't even realize was a thing, because of all of the sneaky ways the algorithm works. And I started to be fed a lot of ADHD related content that I really related with. Now, this is dangerous, of course, because a lot of it is relatable to everyone. Sometimes people put it across very normal experiences. They put it across as ADHD, but there was so much of it that I was like, whoa, like, this is a doctor, this is a psychologist saying these are symptoms, these are experiences that people have with ADHD. I was like, I need to investigate this further. I was fortunate that a friend of mine was an educational psychologist, which is like, this is his jam. This is what he does. And I was able to talk to him further about it. And he knew me in high school. And he was like, yeah, like, just from knowing you in high school, like, we'll do a proper diagnosis, but just from knowing you in high school, you definitely have it. And then we went through a process of doing a 3-hour test where I'm answering various questions. There's a practical test that you're answering on a computer to like measure your reaction time and all that kind of stuff. But then it's also just sitting down with a psychologist and talking about your experience at school, talking about the kind of things people would say about you, talking about how you would interact with your parents and what they would say about your academics. And after that, that came back. And it was like, you are so deeply ADHD. Like, it's not like you're not on the cusp. You're not maybe. You are very clearly, this is something that you have.
Okay, so there is a legitimate test. There is a legitimate process to getting a diagnosis. I ask this because I've sat in a therapist's office before, and after seeing them 3 times, they start to speak to me about diagnoses that they're convinced I have. But we haven't run a series of things, and that put me off quite quickly. So because we're sharing, she had said to me in conversation, she's pretty sure, like, that's typical of AS, and I was like, what's that? And then she paused, and she said, "Haven't we spoken about this?" And I said, "Nope." Anyway, long story short, she'd already decided that I was on the autism spectrum, but we hadn't done anything to confirm that. So I'm very pleased to hear that there is a legitimate test and a process that one needs to go through to get a proper diagnosis. It's very true, as you say, we can watch Instagram and TikTok and we can self-diagnose and then not necessarily get the help that we really do need. Glad you went the right route and you figured it out. What does it mean to you to actually have the diagnosis moving forward?
So I think the big thing about the diagnosis, the couple of big things that came out of it, the first one was that there are different kinds of ADHD, right? So we get told this person has ADHD and we kind of assign them a stereotype that we think. But there's the hyperactivity aspect to it, and there's the attention aspect to it. And I was very much on the attention dysregulation side of it, which is helpful because, when you think, like you're talking about in your intro, you think of like ADD or ADHD, you think of the naughty kid in class who just can't sit still, who's always, talking, who's always getting in trouble, not paying attention, who's always trying to find ways to distract everyone else and is a real problem child. I wasn't like that. I was shy. I was quiet. I did my work. But to be told to get a diagnosis and to have a expert explain what the attention dysregulation actually means, to have that explain everything that I went through in school and in varsity and through all of my life, actually in so many different parts of my life, it was such a relief. Because like I said, I really thought that I was stupid. I really thought that I just wasn't a smart person. I thought I was pretending. I thought I was a dumb person who was pretending to be smart, which is what I would tell my wife all the time. Like, no, I'm very good at pretending that I'm smart and I can fool people. But to be told, no, you don't have a low IQ. You have this other thing that means your brain works differently. And then that was the last big takeaway was, my therapist, the person who diagnosed me, he also has ADHD, which was really good because he knew how to speak about it in a way that was not, oh, this is something that you're going to be struggling with for the rest of your life. And this is like he was the one who first told me the word deficit is actually incorrect. It's a dysregulation, because the reality is there are times when I can hyperfocus. There are times when I can do amazing stuff. And his big point was that actually what the reality is, the world is not designed for people who have the kind of brain that I have. The world is designed for people who can sit down and focus for an hour, for 2 hours. That's what school trains you to do. And to get that that stuff done. The world isn't designed for people who can think fast, who can come up with plans quickly, who can notice patterns quickly, who have a real empathy for picking up signals from people. Like it's almost I know people put ADHD and autism in the same thinking because they're both neurodivergence, but the reality is people with ADHD are able to they're more attuned to the emotional outputs of other people. They can walk into we can walk into a room and go, weird vibe here. That person has a negative issue with that person. Okay, how do we fix this? I know. I mean, I'm sure you have picked it up from me as well. Like you and I'll be messaging back and forth, and I'll be like, "You're totally fine. Like you're not rude or anything." But I'll just be like, "Hey, dude, are you okay?" And you'll be like, "Actually, I'm really tired." And I can just pick up that from the like. There's something about your message that I'm just like, Sean's having a tough day today. So he was able to kind of outline all of these positives about having ADHD, which was also like, oh, okay, double relief. Like I can explain why I've been struggling in the past, and now I have this like semi superpower to go forward with.
I do want to go back to how ADHD or ADD, as it was first known, and I think Ritalin as one of the more prominent drugs for tampering and helping the brain calm things down and able to focus. I think it's been around for a while, but the 80s and 90s was kind of when ADD became a bit more of a diagnosable, actually recognizable type of thing. So it wouldn't be too surprising that many adults, and I suppose millennials, 30s, 40s, may have not been misdiagnosed, but it was just completely missed. We didn't necessarily see it as ADD or ADHD. It was just hyperactive, naughty, disruptive, couldn't concentrate. And I'm interested to know if you can think back, your report cards when they came back home, were they saying Terence is exceptionally diligent and does everything that he needs to do?
No. So yes, I think this is why, like, also just to touch on the idea that there are so many adults who are now getting diagnosed. The problem is that in the 80s and 90s, more in the 90s when I was at school, it was only the kids who were really bottom of the class, really struggling, that got any sort of occupational therapy or any sort of attention because, whoa, these kids need help. Whereas if you were passing, if you were doing fine, if you were maybe not getting A's, but you were getting by, you clearly understood the work. Even if it was clear that you could do better, there wasn't that much focus put on you. There wasn't something that was like, oh, we need to have a therapeutic intervention here. So for me, all of my report cards from throughout junior school was very much like, Terence has done well this year, but he still isn't achieving what he's capable of. Almost every single report card was, Terence is a pleasant child. He's very polite. He does tend to talk a lot in class. He tends not to always complete his work, but when he does complete his work, he does well. And looking back, I always ask myself the question, no one in 12 years of me going to school, and I went to a good school, but I think this shows you more about what the time was like. No one asked why. Every single term, every single teacher would go, Terence is not achieving what he's capable of. And not one teacher went, why is Terence not achieving what he's capable of? It was always seen as a character flaw of me.
And can we also say there that hearing over and over and over again that you're not reaching your potential is disheartening.
Totally.
And we can see then why, if someone has not been diagnosed and don't understand themselves well enough, how it can lead to things like depression.
And anxiety, because you're now, ooh, I'm letting people down. People are upset because if I just, and I think that's also why I would think of myself and call myself stupid and have a low IQ, so that like I could take that pressure off myself, like the expectation then is lower because I'm not actually capable of, it was like me raging against those report cards saying that Terence is capable of more. I'm like, no, I'm not capable of more. I'm a dummy. That was really, and again, I'm not saying this about anyone else. I'm saying this about myself. And I know if my wife listens to this, she's going to get very upset because she loves me and she hates it when I have like negative talk about myself. But those were very, like you say, very, very disheartening. And it's a lot to put on. Like, I was 6, 7, 8, and 9. I mean, I have a 7-year-old and a 9-year-old right now. And I would not expect them to fully understand how their own brains are working. I think the adults around them, me included, needs to be the one that's saying, okay, I see you're struggling with this. Let's figure out why you're struggling with this. What can we do to help you not struggle with this? Is it hard for you to do this? As opposed to it being, you're not doing your work because you're naughty, which is what it was back in the day. You're lazy, you're misbehaving. Oh, you'd rather be in front of the TV than do your work. And I'm like, I wish I could say this when I was 7. I can say it now because I can be like, when I'm playing computer games and I know I have, I'm studying at the moment, I know I have stuff to study. I'm not ignoring the studying. I'm playing the video game. And in my mind, I'm like, no, I need to study. It's freaking me out. But I can't get myself to put it down and do the work. So it's the weirdest feeling of the anxiety is building and building and building, and I just can't get myself to do the thing. And throughout high school, when my parents were like, why aren't you studying? Come on, sit down and study. Just sit down and study. My dad would be ripping his hair out saying, just sit down and study for 30 minutes. That's all I want you to do today. It's 30 minutes. And I'm like, I would just fight against that. And they could not understand why. And again, to back my parents up, they're not experts. They're not educational experts. They needed someone to come in and say, okay, here's why your child actually you need to break it up to 15-minute chunks for him. Kids that take an hour to do stuff, he can do in 15 minutes. So he doesn't need the hour of studying. Just give him the 15 minutes and he can get it done. Wow, but if you're trying to get him to do it for an hour, you're going to kill him. So
you mentioned your kids a moment ago, and you've got 2 very active boys. Do they have any understanding of ADHD at all? What do they know about what dad is going through?
We haven't really spoken about that yet. I do worry about putting a burden on them to understand their dad more. Considering that this is something that I've only in my later life have started to understand myself. So it's not something we really talk about a lot, but it does come through in the way we talk about their schoolwork. So a lot of the time when they have homework to do, we're very aware of the mental space they're in. We're very, very aware of, hey, okay, you have these 3 things to do for homework. If we can get this thing done, then we can go and kick the ball around outside. Then we can get this thing done, and then we can do something else. So it has changed the way we think about schoolwork and we think about work as well. This is something that can be passed down genetically, if it's not a trauma response. So it is something that we're also very aware, like looking at, Eli, who's our biological child, looking at like, does he have any of the symptoms? But he's too young to diagnose. That is also the danger, though, is that he might just be behaving like a normal 7-year-old, but because now I have this ADHD life, everything he does, I'm like, oh, ADHD, ADHD. I see it everywhere.
Let's talk about those superpowers now, because over the span of your career, you've probably found certain things help and other things hinder your effectiveness. Something like COVID that only happened 2020, and you were also diagnosed 2020. Things like that, working remotely, working in teams, getting projects done on time, delivering presentations. How have you found ADHD to help and to hinder your career?
So it's definitely hindered my career before I got the diagnosis, because again, I didn't understand why I was struggling to do hard projects or things that caused me anxiety. And it really put me in a box where I didn't feel like I could achieve anything. Once I got the diagnosis, like the weird thing is, you would think that once you get diagnosed with ADHD as an adult, the one thing you wouldn't do is start studying again. But getting it and understanding how my brain works I felt confident to go, okay, I now know how I need to study. And I also know what expectations to put on myself for the courses that I'm doing. So I'm not going to expect that I'm going to get straight firsts and A's for everything. I'm not going to expect that I'm going to do all the work 3 days before they're due. I am going to expect that it's going to be done the night before, but I know that I'll get it done because I'm working through a process in a way that works for me. But when it comes to the actual superpowers of ADHD, which is actually to answer your question, firstly, the social aspect of it. I think being energetic and enthusiastic, and quite sociable, which is one of the traits for people with my kind of ADHD. I think that's been really beneficial for me. It means that I think people like having me around. Like I bring a bit of energy into a room, hopefully not a distracting energy. I've worked very hard at being positive and not a distraction because I know I can be. So that has helped me get into spaces and rooms where maybe other people wouldn't have been. I notice, like I said, I notice patterns better, which helps me to learn new tools much faster than other people. This is one of the things that like my wife and I constantly argue about, because when there's some new piece of tech that comes into the house or there's something new that we have to figure out, she'll just hand it over to me. And because she knows that it'll take her 4 times longer than it's going to take me, because I'm just able to assimilate information faster. It's almost like my central processor runs faster but hotter and then shuts down every now and then. So I'm able to pick up new tools and new processes a lot faster. And I'm also able to like ideate things. I'm able to come up with new ideas. And I think that's part of the solution problem solving aspect of ADHD as well, where I often find that I'll be in meetings and people will be talking about an issue or a problem, and I have to like hold my tongue because I know they'll get there eventually, but I'm already thinking of the solution. And I know that sounds cocky, but like there are times I'm like, I don't want to be the person who's saying the thing that I mean, surely everyone's thinking this. And I realize, oh no, they're not thinking this. I'm thinking this like 4 steps ahead of time. So there's a lot of ways that's been beneficial.
Yeah, I mean, I have never been diagnosed. There's so much of what you're saying that resonates so strongly with me. I can be in conversations and I can crack a joke as an example, and nobody laughs. But about 30 seconds later, somebody else in the group says almost exactly the same thing to the word, and everybody laughs. And that I started taking that quite personally. I'm like, I just said that. Why didn't you laugh when I said it? And many other instances. Maybe I should, Anyway, let's not get there now.
No. But yeah, it sounds like you should go and get some therapeutic and do the test. And
yeah.
But again, there are people who have, like I said, these are things that other people can go, oh, I'm like that too. It doesn't mean you have ADHD. You might just have a symptom of it. But it's all of those things together that make me the wonderful flower that I am.
You are a wonderful flower, and flowers are beautiful to look at, and
sometimes they give you hay fever. I guess.
What's your shiny object at the moment? What's the thing that distracts you the most at the moment?
So you and I have a podcast together, another podcast, because I think you have similar problems to what I have, called Have You Asked Your Dad? And it's the thing that and my fatherhood blog called Aphrodite. Those are the 2 things I think that I would much rather be thinking about those things than anything else at any given point of day. And when I do give myself the time to work on those things, that is not a burden. It's not a struggle for me to get going on editing the next episode or to think about the next episode or to plan. I'm like, I actually have to stop myself from doing that because I have other things to do. So that's, for me, those 2 things are the shiny objects that my brain naturally, it feels like it's calibrated to think about those things. It just kind of defaults into that. It's never a case of, I have to make a note. Think about, have you asked your dad? Think about Aphrodite. It's like, no, I'm just doing it. And at the expense of other things usually.
Do you consider then having ADHD as being a curse?
Is ADHD a curse? It's a curse in the way Superman is cursed. Because yes, he has superpowers, but it makes his life difficult. You know, he doesn't want to really be Superman in the world because the world isn't built for Supermen. And he has a kryptonite that he has to look out for, and people don't understand him. So I think that is the curse. If we lived in the world where schools and academic institutions and workplaces were designed to have space for neurodivergent people, and even that makes it sound weird because it's like the idea that there's a normal brain and then there's my brain. No, we're all neurodivergent in our own way. This is a one particular category that we put people in. So if spaces like that were able to work with all different kinds of brains, then it wouldn't be a curse. Then we wouldn't even have a thing called ADHD. It would just be like, oh, Terence is better at those things. We're going to put him in those spaces. Oh, Sean is better at those things. We're going to put him in those spaces, and we all work together. Now saying that, like in my current work, I'm very lucky that I have a boss, and actually several bosses, who are very understanding that I have ADHD. They know how to use my skills to get the best outputs. They know what kind of input I need to keep me happy and stable. And they also know that, you know what, if Terence is going to send out a bulk email to 400 people, maybe someone else should check the email before it goes out, you know? So like, and I know I used to be offended by that. Like, oh, what do you think? I can't double check my own work. And like, actually, Terence, you can't double check your own work because you don't see the errors. So that's why I think it's a curse. It's just that the world is not designed for that. I think it's changing. I see changes happening in the way school works for my kids. It's still not great, like the way kids have to sit down for hours on end and focus from a very young age. But yeah, it's only a curse because of the way the world is, not because of the way we are.
That's a beautiful answer. Thank you for sharing. Terence lives in Plumstead and shares his home with his wife and 2 boys. They also have 2 cats and a dog. Among many things Terence is really good at is our podcast called Have You Asked Your Dad, and his parenting blog, Afro Daddy. He's a dedicated dad and has a genuine care for his friends, something I'm very grateful for. He also has something in common with will.i.am, Michael Phelps, Justin Timberlake, Zooey Deschanel, Simone Biles, and Channing Tatum. Yep, you guessed it. They've all been diagnosed with ADHD. It is important to understand that untreated ADHD in adults can lead to mental health issues like anxiety and depression. This is most likely because ADHD symptoms can lead to problems with focus, concentration, and impulsivity. And when these problems are not managed effectively, they can lead to feelings of frustration, irritability, and low self-esteem, like Terence mentioned. If you are in any way unsure of the experiences you're having, please consider seeking professional advice from a registered psychologist or counselor. Did you know the international symbol for mental health awareness is a green ribbon? Reason being that green signifies new life, new growth, and new beginnings. You can show your support for this podcast by posting a green heart to Instagram. Oh, and tag me, please, Sean Lewitz. It'll be our thing. If you've enjoyed this episode, please consider giving the podcast a 5-star review and telling your friends about it. It really does help grow the show. And speaking of growing the show, you know so much about me already, but I know very little about you. Go ahead, tap the link in the show notes and complete a short survey. It'll help me make this podcast even better. Thanks so much. If you are looking for ways to incrementally build a healthier life, subscribe to my newsletter for free. It's called Something Shifted. The link is in the show notes. Right, that's it. Until the next time, my name's Sean Lewitz. Speak soon.